Any questions so far? Okay. I have a, okay. All right. File system permissions and ownership. Permissions usually create the biggest problems when you're using a Unix system. Sometimes it's because people don't understand how to use them, and they don't understand how it works and the result of you changing the permissions around. So, file permissions control the ability of a user to view or make changes to the contents of a file. They also control the ability to execute a file. So not all files are executable, even if they're a binary. You actually have to, if they're an executable binary, like a .exe in Windows, just because it's a .exe, you're supposed to be able to run it. In Linux, that doesn't happen. It could be a executable binary, but if you don't give it permission to execute, it's not gonna run at all. Ownership controls what permissions apply to who. If you could see there, I have like 3 little groups: owner, group, and other, or sometimes it's user, group, and other, or world. I'm gonna explain that here in a second. So the permissions are read, write, and execute. You can read a file, you can write to the file, or you can execute the file. You see the numbers there, 4, 2, 1, because all of this is in binary. File permissions is 1 byte, which is 8 bits. So it goes from 0 to 7. 0 obviously is nothing, so you don't have any permissions. And that's going to be depicted by a couple hashes, 3 hashes per octet. Excuse me. And the way you get multiple, the way you set permissions on a file is basically adding. You got the 4, 2, and 1. So if you want to set read and execute, you set the permission to 5. Obviously, 4 plus 1 is 5. Now, owner. You see, you got read, write, execute for the owner or the user. That's basically whoever creates the file. Or if you copied the file, permissions vary. But if you create a text file under your home directory, you're going to be the owner. Also, the group is going to have your group unless you change it. The thing with that, I think I mentioned it earlier. If you want to share things with people in your same group, all you got to do is give them permissions. And only the people that are in your group are going to have access to that resource, that file, in this case. The last one, other, it means everybody else, the world. So unless you explicitly give permissions to everybody to use or to see the contents of your file or execute them, they're not going to be able to. Have some notes here. Oh, they're not coming out. Okay, so they're not coming out the way they're supposed to. But
so if we wanted to do a brief exercise, would you open a command line, go to a folder, do ls-al, look at permissions, maybe change one? Or?
Yep, and we're about to do that.
Rock.
So I wish I could see these. Oops. I don't know why they're not showing up, but basically it just talks about the bits and what permissions, what the permissions grant you to do. So before we get into the exercise, real quick, the permissions on a file on a directory, they're basically going to be the same except for that at the beginning there's a D, obviously, for directory. If it's just a regular file, it's going to have a hash. Permissions affect the two differently. So read permissions on a directory let you access by name a specific file. So if you don't, and obviously this is all a combination, so you got to have read, write, execute. So if you can read a directory, but you can't execute it. Meaning you can't change directory to it. You're only going to be able to list the file if you know the full name of the file. If you have execute on a directory, but you don't have read, you'll be able to get the names of the files, but you're not going to get any other information about them. And then obviously write, it just lets you create new files, rename them, delete files from the directory. As opposed to a regular file, like a text file, for example. Reading is viewing the contents of the file. Writing is so you can edit it, and executing if it's a script that needs to load into memory and run. All right. So, if you guys look at the screen, you remember this 421 read, write, execute for owner, group, and other, right? Can somebody tell me what the permissions are for the first one, for the file example? Right. I know you know. So you see the first one, right? Look at the numbers, 4, 2, and 1. All right?
Read, write, read, read.
Right, correct.
Who can read, write?
Yeah, so who can do what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Writing in the numbers?
Huh? And yep, both of those. Who can do what? Correct.
What group? You can tell that too. You can tell right there.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a pointer. So, permissions. It's a file, so obviously the first one, it's just a hash. Obviously this is a directory, so it has a D. Read, write, execute, read, write, execute will be these two. Read, write, execute will be these two. This is the owner of the file. This is the group that file belongs to. In this case, yes, they're both Joe. But it could be Joe, admin. We're going to do that here in a second. This is actually the file size, the date, last modified date, and then the location of the file, the full path. Same thing here. Directory, read, write, execute, read, execute, read, execute. This is the home directory, so you don't want people just writing, putting stuff in your home directory just because. Owner, group, size of the directory, date, last modified, and the path. So, if you look at the bottom one here, chmod, that changes the permission, but you see I'm passing it numbers, right? That's what corresponds to these over here. That's why you gotta know, excuse me, that's why you gotta know what's 4, 2, and 1. Going back to this. We got read 4, write 2, execute 1. There's another way, but it's a little bit more convoluted. So, read, write, 4 plus 2, 6. Obviously the 7 is not there, or the 1's not there. 4, 4. You can set permissions another way by just saying, I want user to execute, or I want group to execute. So you would do chmod, instead of the numbers, you would put which category you want to affect. So you could put, like in this case, O, and then you would put plus W, or O plus X. You could put G plus X or minus if you want to take it, and you specify it that way. But if you know this, you don't have to, you can just put a number and be quick. So I'm harping on this because if you go to /etc and see the password file and shadow file, that it's anybody can write to it, that's going to be a problem. Because if anybody can write to it other than root, then anybody can change. Remember what I said about the user ID being 0? Only root is 0. So you can create an account and change the user ID, make it 0, and now you become root automatically. That's why this is important. Okay, let's go grab a virtual machine. So if I just do ls, it just gives me the files. The TACL is a long view. If I do the A, it shows all, which shows me all the files that are hidden. In Unix and Linux, anything that has a dot in front of it is hidden. So if you look at the permissions here, read, write, nothing else for this one file. Different directories, Mozilla. So this is the Firefox. All the settings for Firefox are in here. Only Joe, in this case me, has access to the file, to the folder. Now, how do I change that? If I can type. So right now, only the Joe has access to that folder, right? Now, people in Joe's group also have access to that folder. So, let's see. So the password file, only root can read and write to it. Everybody else can read it, but you can't write to it. So right here, root's user ID was 0, right? No, if you look all the way down, nobody else has 0. Joe is actually 1,000. Okay? So show you something real quick. This is what they were before, when only root had read and write. Now everybody has read write. Actually, I even turned on execute just cause. Now, you see it screen on the terminal. If I don't want to make it that obvious, so now everybody has read write. So now as Joe instead of root. I can come here and make myself root. Done. So now if I log out, log back in, I will immediately be root. If I had the correct permissions, I wouldn't be able to do that.
You guys know what file it's in right now? That's the password file, basically a list of all the user accounts on the system. And their associated group and home directory.
What do you type to get to there again?
Do you want to see a listing like that?
Yeah.
So you type the command less, LESS, into the file, read and write directory, Etsy directory.
Sorry, Joe, did you want everybody to be on?
Oh, no. I was just doing the demo of how I can change that now that we don't have the right permission.
So when you do sudo, you say you're doing this, you're switching user into the Syslog group. Right. So what's that? So when you can't so you got to do that. You got to put the numbers in, so you can put what permissions you want. So you're gonna do 6666. That's read write, and then the name of the file.
What about, okay, so that's where I'm confused. So 666 is read write because read is 4 and write is 2?
Yes.
Correct.
So why are we going to do it 3 times? That's changing
Owner
everybody?
Group, yeah, owner group, or owner group, and what was the other one?
The world, or
Everybody.
Oh, so then what if I just want the owner? I mean, what if I just want the owner group? I just put 600.
600.
Oh, okay, I got you. But what if so if I want the owner to read and write, but I want the group to just read.
4.
Oh, okay, I got it. And then if I want the world to do nothing.
correct.
Oh, here's this one.
Okay.
Aha, you got it.
And the name of the file.
Alright, so
That's the big change. What do you mean the name of the file? What do you put after? So sudo chmod 640 and then the name of the file. What is that?
So whatever file you want to change the permissions on.
Oh.
So in this case, I changed the permissions on the password file. So I type passwd.
So I did that.
Right.
passwd. And then it tells me no such file or directory.
Oh, so because you're probably not there, you're in your home directory. So do
that's right.
pwd. So you're in pwd is present working directory. So that tells you where you're at. So it's /etc or etc.
Okay.
And then the password file. So you got to change into the directory, or you can specify the full path. So you do cd/etc, and that way you're in that directory.
Oh, okay.
Or
so what is the directory? Then what does cd/etc do? Does that list all the directories?
No, that changes. That puts you into the Etsy directory.
Oh, okay.
If you want to list it, it's ls list.
Oh, okay. So is the Etsy directory? That's the directory I need to be to switch the.
You don't have to be there, because when you do chmod, you can pass it the full path. So you can do chmod 1-640/Etsy/passwd. You can specify
the password file is in the Etsy folder.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I got you.
So I'm gonna go back to my home directory. Just look real quick. So I'm in my home directory here, right? And I can. There you go. So I'm in my home directory, as you can see here, right? But since I'm specifying the full path of the file, it doesn't matter where I'm at, because I'm specifying. Bash is gonna know how to get to it. So that's my home directory, and I'm specifying this is the directory the file is in, and this is the file that I want to change.
Okay.
Okay.
So but we don't have to put the Etsy if we're already in that Etsy folder.
Correct. If you're in Etsy, you can. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm just saying, start from root and find the file in this directory.
Okay. Now, what happens if you click enter?
So.
What was LS?
So it's list what? What is the L?
Oh, long format. So if I. So let me clear this. All right. So if I do ls, I just get a directory, right? And it's just the names. If I do the long format, so now I get more information. So I get the permissions, user, group, size, modified date and time, and then the name. So sometimes you can do, they have shortcuts already built in, like LL, and it does the same thing. Yeah, yeah, instead of typing ls tag L, you just do LL, and it's the same thing as doing that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so once you get to that, and then you want to change the permissions for whatever you want to change permissions for. You have to do, if we want to change permission for the password, right? We do the sudo chmod 666 password or whatever afterward in the Etsy folder, and then you said that we had to delete the 1000 because the user was on 1000.
Oh no, so that was the demo of if the permissions are not set correctly for the file. That what I did, I set them so that anybody in the world could modify the password file.
Okay.
So that's why I said 666. So I went in there as a regular user, Joe, which normally has no permissions, has no rights to be able to edit that file. Since the rights were, I don't want to say messed up, but they were altered, a regular user, Joe in this case, can go ahead and change the user ID and stuff like that. If you change your user ID and you make it 0, when you log in, you're going to become root. Right. So how do you know you're root or not? In Linux, it's easy. If you're a regular user, you have a $ next to your name.
Right.
If you're root, so now I'm root.
See, is that like run as administrator in the regular operating system?
I'm sorry?
You know when we launch command line? Or,
yes.
So that's like run as administrator kind of?
Sudo.
Okay.
It's like run as administrator. Now, this is obvious, you know, saying yes, I'm root because it says root over here. But if you change the, oops, it says, okay, I can't do this. There we go. It has root. Obviously, I'm root right now. I changed into root. But if you change the user ID of the user, it'll be whatever the username is, but you're still going to see a pound if you're root.
Okay.
So, and that's a big no-no. Having any other user that has a user ID of 0, that's not root, that's big no-no.
You should write that down.
Yeah, I think I said it like 5-6 times already, right?
Yeah,
it's
don't have it.
All right.
Okay, so what if we need to be in the system as root so we could alter like programs and stuff?
If you want to do lots of things, so there's a lot of repetitive repetitive tasks that you have to type sudo blah 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 for whatever you want to do. So Bash is smart enough to know that you put in your password, you type in sudo, you put in your password, and you're going to do something else, you type in sudo again. It knows that it's still you, so it remembers the password, so it's not going to ask you for a password again. Okay. Eventually, it'll time out. Right. You know, so, but if you don't want to keep typing sudo every single time, you can do sudo tag I, and that elevates you to root, or you could just type su, well, I'm already root, so exit. So you would type su and dash, and you will log in. Now, if I recall correctly, now they have the root account disabled. So if I do this, I don't have a password associated with it.
Yeah, you have to issue
correct.
The password.
So I will have to, right. So by default, the root account is disabled. You can do a sudo tag I, or you could type sudo su, and you'll be able to elevate. And then once you root, then you could type passwd and assign yourself a password, and that would unlock the account. It's a security feature. It's every time you do sudo, or if you su into an account, there's a log associated with it. Okay. So it's for tracking who's doing what. So speaking of logs, actually let me clear this. So
best practice on changing permissions, 0 for everybody typically, 640, or at least a 0 at the end. You don't want to,
yes, yes.
Want to give everyone
yeah, definitely. Just be careful with what you change. There are files that definitely need to be read by certain programs that are not necessarily either you or part of your group. For example, the password file, it's read for everybody, and only root, which is the owner of the file, can write to it. So if you start dorking around with that, you might not be able to log in, or other people are not going to be able to log in. So yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, that's the worst thing you could do. Log yourself out then. You can fix it by booting into the live CD again, mounting the hard drive, and editing it. You know, that's the cool thing about live CDs, but you don't want to go through all the hassle. So, all right. So, the var directory. Has all kinds of information that gets put into that. That folder crash. So in the Windows world, everybody knows a blue screen. So when you blue screen, it actually creates a file. It's a memory dump or a mini dump of everything that you supposedly had running in RAM at that point in time. It'll create a dump file, which if you so choose to, later on you can go back to the file and look at it to see what happened. In the forensics class, they're going to teach you that that's very juicy stuff, because if you were typing in a password or something and it was stored in memory at that time, you can get it from the dump file. Same thing here. Crash, when the system crashes, it'll put a dump file in there. So, yes?
In order to prep for the January forensics class, everything you've shown us here, what should students do between now and that class to prep? Just get familiar with these commands?
Play with Linux. If you can break it, good, because it's a image, so you can always revert back to the image and start fresh. But play around. I mean, that's the best way. Honestly, the best thing I could tell you on how to learn to use Linux is just play with it.
Like create
users. Yeah, go create users, go change permissions, go delete something, go to the proc directory and try to delete everything, see what happens. You know, it's actually funny to watch. Just play around, and if you don't know how to do something, go to Google, literally put in whatever you have in your head, just type it in exactly like that, and it's going to come up with an answer. So real quick on the var log directory, that's where you get you have most of your log files. Basically anything that has to do with the system, the kernel is going to be logged in here. There's a daemon called Syslog. Yes, daemon. Basically all applications that interact with the kernel mainly, and they have notifications or warnings, things like that, it'll pass it on to this subsystem, this daemon, and the daemon is going to record it into a text file locally, or you can actually set it up to have the logs being shipped out to another computer over the network. Over here you can see like boot log, you can see bootstrap log, auth log. This is all the logs that you can check to see who's been logging on. If you have problems when you're booting up, it'll give you a better idea of what's causing the problem. Okay. Jump back to this. Try and get done with these quick. Any questions so far? Am I boring you a lot? Probably.